Hello once again, folks. Welcome back to Thinking Out Loud. One more week. Thanks everyone who's joining already in the chat, who's been messaging me privately. Welcome to new watchers as well. For those who don't know what Thinking Out Loud is, it is meant to be the most boring show ever. So this is not a show at all. This is a thinking session. And so I regularly invite, usually weekly, I invite guests to join me in a thinking session, right? So we'll be thinking about something every week, something usually different, but related to async KPI and and related to projects. There's no script, so what you're seeing here is I'm improvising. So I'm just even now I'm improvising. I'm just sharing what comes out of my head, and yeah. So every week, like I said, I'm sharing. I'm inviting someone to share thoughts out loud, right? If you want. So cool. Welcome once again. One thing before I continue, I want to make this clear. So we're live on YouTube on how's it called? The Amazon platform. I can't I can't even remember. Anyway, forget about it. Like so we're in multiple streaming platforms, right? But the only one that the only one that supports closed captions is YouTube for now, right? So, or at least that's the one that we figured out how to do it. So if you have some ideas on how to make it work, please let us know, right? So if you need closed captions, please head over to our YouTube channel and enable them there, right? So it's already enabled, and except from my accent, everything should be working perfectly. So cool. Just wanted to mention that. That's it. It's not a secret. So for today's episode, I invited Ben Hutton from Json Schema specification and Json Schema project, who also happens to work with me at Postman. And yeah, it was easy for me to invite him. Like it was like I had him at hand, right? So it was like, yes, we should actually speak. So I don't want to delay this more. So welcome, Ben.
Hi.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So you might want to introduce yourself. So for those who don't know you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ben Hutton. Thank you for the introduction, Fran. I'm the lead on the Json Schema project, and I work at Postman full-time on open source, which is really great to be able to do. Currently, I kind of describe my role as the hat stand, in that I wear many hats at a time and try to get everything done that nobody else wants to do. Or we don't have enough people to do. The Json Schema community is great, and there are many implementations, but there is a lot to do as we sort of try to mature as a project and really grow and develop what's capable with Json Schema.
Nice. Cool introduction. I actually support your description of wearing many hats. I can feel you. It is weird sometimes. Look at me. I'm an engineer and I'm doing a live stream here now, right? So what am I doing? So yeah, I can easily relate there. So well, we have people in the chat already. So Eric Wilde, welcome and hello. I also want to take the opportunity to mention that you can join the conversation anytime. So this is a thinking session between in the live stream. It's going to be between Ben and I, right? But anyone can join. So if you have thoughts, just share them. If you have questions, just share them as well. So don't feel bad, don't feel shy about it, and share your thoughts. Let's make it like a community live stream if you want. Cool. So Ben, I think mandatory question right now is, what's up with Json Schema? Like, what's I've seen that there has been a lot of movement lately, and you might want to give us a summary of the last years.
Yeah, sure. So since the release of the last version of the specification, we've been looking to see what issues the community are facing and how it's being received, particularly how OpenAPI is using JSON Schema, and yourselves as well, and other similar projects, how everybody's using JSON Schema after the big changes that we made in the last version of the specification. Added a bit more complexity for implementers, but we're seeing more and more implementers pick that up as they support the newer versions. So that's 2012. Excuse me. So we've been working a lot on the next version of the specification, which is going to focus on fixing up and ambiguities in the specification that things that aren't quite as we intended them to be, or things which raise certain questions or could be interpreted in different ways. We've nailed down most of those. We're at one issue left now. We were at one or two issues left a couple of months ago, and I rather stupidly put out a tweet, "Oh, we're nearly done now. We only got one or two issues left," and then we created some more as we received some more feedback. A lot of what I've been doing since I've joined Postman is more to do with outreach, communication, engagements with the community, engagements with the industry, and that's really starting to pick up now. We have one published case study. I was so excited to be able to publish our first case study in both English and Japanese. We're seeing a lot of uptake in JSON Schema from the Japanese community, or the Japanese speaking community anyway, and that's really great to see such a big discussions on Twitter about JSON Schema, and we've made out carved out space for them in our community, and we hope to see more people join us from other languages. We're hoping one of our future case studies, which is done and sort of waiting in the wings, will be in multiple languages as well. I've been finishing up a case study today on a rather exciting scientific project and how they're using our data. Unfortunately, NASA wasn't able to do a case study with us, which is a shame, because they do use JSON Schema, and that would have been really great. But governments are unable to do that sort of thing, it seems. Otherwise, it's been articles and sort of trying to grow the JSON Schema organization to function as a more mature organization. Part of that, we've joined the OpenJS Foundation, so we have a lot of structure and governance in place that enables us to grow and mature and take on new community members. And particularly, as I joined Postman, we wanted to assure people that Postman isn't looking to own JSON Schema or claim any sort of control over it, and it is still an open project and owned by the community.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. familiar topic, right?
Yeah. No, that's really cool, and I think actually the fact that you also joined, like OpenJS, or did you finally open, or are you still in the process, or did I?
We are formally joined. We are an incubator project. For OpenJS,
awesome.
When you're an incubator project, you're fully joined, and we sort of have a checklist of things they would like us to do, and we sort of try and work towards a different project status by completing those tasks.
So what does it mean for people in the community that you join OpenJS?
I think there's a sense of immediate credibility. there are not hundreds and hundreds of products in the OpenJS Foundation. There are a select few. Hello. Meow.
I haven't invited another guest, so
Thank you for joining us.
sorry. She might ask questions.
Oh yeah, please do. It does give us an immediate credibility. One of the pain points for JSON schema is people not realizing they're using it a lot. We often get people going, "Oh, we use AJV or this other library, and we have this config file which enables us to do some validation." And we're often like, "Yeah, that can be used by other implementations in other languages as well, or to generate documentation." They're like, "Whoa, really? AJV is really cool, right?" And I'm like, no, it's JSON schema, and that's what you're using in your Open API definitions as well, and all of your other, your library generation tools and things that you use to generate models for your databases, and yeah, it's often surprising to people. So that immediate credibility of being a product in its own right, and the recognition that it's a credible and sustainable product, I think is really good. People are evaluating JSON schema versus other solutions, and a lot of the other solutions have big organizations around them, like Apache Thrift or Google's protocol buffers, and JSON schema has really sort of been on its own in that sense, in that it hasn't had a major backer. It's nominally part of the IETF, but it's not actually part of any IETF processes. So it's not part of an IETF working group. It's what's known as an independent submission. And anybody can make those independent submissions if they're of a reasonable quality and they're actually at some sort of specification. Yeah.
That's good to know. Actually, you mentioned that some people are using JSON schema without knowing they're using JSON schema, and that's still like sounds familiar. Right?
Yeah.
So actually, I wanted to share something that I don't know if I have it at hand, because I wasn't expecting you to mention this. So let me share this screen, because I have something here. Where is it? Okay. Oh gosh. Yeah, I never use Chrome.
I mean, either.
and it's asking for permissions that I'm not gonna follow. I'm not gonna. Yeah, just don't care about. Let's see if it works. Yeah, no. Let me just again. So it is actually well. So I want to show, and I hope I can still do it. It's so I'm tracking lately. I'm trying to categorize every question that we're taking on the Slack workspace. Usually, like all the questions that people ask about the spec, about the tooling, and so on. So I'm trying to categorize them, and I have, so I've done a Slack app to help me with this process, which at some point I'm gonna probably talk about it and share it with the rest. And I'm now working on a visualization, like how many times are people asking, or what is the most frequent category of questions, right? And that we have a huge problem, I will say, in async API, which is the publish and subscribe meaning, and you probably have heard of them, maybe not, but what I mean is that if you work with async API just 5 minutes, you instantly think like, that's weird, that publish, but I really subscribe, but I really publish. Everything, like something is broken here, right? And so I was expecting this to be the number one, and to my surprise, that was the number two. And the number one category is questions about JSON schema. related to JSON schema, not to async KPI. So people come to the async KPI workspace to ask questions on how to define their data with JSON schema, which is another point that I'm going to mention afterwards. So yeah, and I find it like kind of frustrating because it's like yeah, people are not realizing that this is JSON schema, even though we mention it on the spec. Like, no, this is JSON schema. Here's a small example, and you can go to the website or to the IETF RFC and read more, right, and know more about how to use this part of the spec, which is not the spec, is just JSON schema, right? So, but even like that, people, I understand, like people most probably are not reading the spec, most probably are learning by example and finding that there is a chunk here that lets you define data again, and then they just come to us and to ask questions, right? Which yeah, like I said, like can be sometimes frustrating, and we always respond like we don't make any differentiation like no, this is not our problem, you go to JSON schema Slack and figure
You
out.
can send them our way. That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine for us, but for them it will be yet another
Yeah,
Slack,
yeah.
like, and it's like yet another place to ask questions, and it's a little bit like for them it's a little bit of a broken experience, right? Like everything is
I'm
it's
wondering if we can connect up a Slack channel, because I know we both have. Oh yeah, that's one of the other things that JSON Schema now has full or some sort of paid Slack access. Well, hey, at last, it took us that long. I'm wondering if we can connect up some sort of JSON Schema async API channel so people can ask on your server but have access to the broader depth of knowledge from the JSON Schema server.
Yeah, I was wondering now as well. Like this could be an interesting thing. So we can actually send people to the channel, not to another workspace, right? So yeah, no, definitely something. I mean, let's not forget to propose this on the Slack, so we can do it. And yeah, and there's something. Hey, Dave.
Hey.
So, and Sergio, by the way. So there's something that that I said before. People come to our channel, to our workspace, and ask for ways to define their data using JSON schema, and that itself is wrong, right? Because yeah, so JSON schema is not for defining data structures, and correct me if I'm mistaken. It is for defining validation rules, let's say. Is that correct? Will it be like
Yeah, I
correct
mean
definition?
the way we generally sort of phrase it is it's for defining constraints. People are more familiar with this when they think about their database structures. You have your table definition, which is your your table schema, but then you also have constraints that you can place over those columns or those rows as well. And JSON schema defines the constraints, but it also kind of defines some of the structure. And I think that's probably why it's confusing, because it doesn't sit strictly in that sort of constraint based world, because it kind of also constrains the different types of data you can have in what you traditionally think of as tables or in an object.
So actually, I was just thinking that, like when I created async API, I was like at that time I was using heavily OpenAPI and well Swagger at that time, and I was like also thinking that this JSON schema part, which I mean in the case of OpenAPI Swagger, older versions, it was like a kind of mix of like JSON schema with something different. Like it was I think I don't remember who defined it like this, but
Subset superset.
yeah, a superset of a subset or something like a subset
Mm.
superset or something like that. Yeah, it was, and to me it
Yes.
resonated really well. Like it was like it's just a subset, and then they augmented it with
Mm.
something new, and then it was like kind of Jason Schema, but no, not really.
Mm.
So yeah, but yeah, aside from that, I was understanding this as a modeling tool, right? As a modeling language, right? So to model your data, which or mixed with validations. To be honest, like at the time, I didn't even think about it. Like I somehow understood it like this, but in my head, it was in the OpenAPI context. It was like, oh, this is to model my request or my response shape, right? And yeah, and you can also place validations, which is cool. Um, but yeah, in my head, it was all about modeling the data, and and that was translated into async API, of course, because I had this confusion on OpenAPI, and therefore I copied that confusion to async API, and now we have the same problem in async API, right? Unsurprisingly, right? So it's like so what happens is that one of the I mean, aside from documentation, one of the biggest use cases for us is generating code. So people want to generate code, um, but depending on your JSON schema definition, um, it might be easy or possible, or it might be hard or impossible, right? And I'm gonna explain myself. So what happens? So for those who are watching, um, there are some JSON schema constructs that are like, I don't know, like additional properties, uh, the not keyword, one of, any of, all of, right? All of them, all of these features are really cool for validation. But when you want to translate this into code generation, like let's generate a type um, on a Java class or a TypeScript type or something like that, how do you translate a not, or how do you translate a additional properties? Damn it, right? So
Yeah.
it's like we're facing this problem now. That and how do you think we can solve this problem?
That's a good question, and it's one that we thought about for a long time, and we kind of we thought about it for before, probably not before async API existed, but for like 3-4 years at least. We see people coming in, we see people with these use cases which are beyond validation, and code generation is one of those primary ones, and documentation generation, form generation, all the sorts of generation where you're kind of using JSON schema as a proxy for your data definition or your interface definition, because it kind of looks like that sort of structure. So why not use it as that? Um, and that's that's fine to do. In all honesty, people can do that. But each tool which digests that schema is going to do so in a slightly different way, as things stand right now. So we thought about how we can enable all these different use cases, because we certainly didn't have the people power to handle those ourselves. We were kind of stretched super thin as it was. Um, did we lose Fran? Can you still hear us? Oh, I might be here on my own.
Yeah, I can still hear you, but as you can imagine, my cat was hanging around
Ah.
and disconnected the camera.
Oh no! Oh no! I'll
So
continue
yeah, yeah,
yabbering away.
just go ahead. Yeah, just go ahead. I'm
Um,
trying to fix it first.
so yeah, like we clearly saw all these needs for use cases beyond validation, because JSON schema as it is right now is not something you can reliably use for code generation or for form generation or any sort of other generation. And we wanted to support all these and enable all these use cases, but empowering others to pick them up. So we developed this idea of vocabularies, which are parts of or JSON schema, or sets of keywords you can write as extensions to JSON schema, but you can define them as part of your schema in a way that makes it reusable. So the Open API initiative, for example, have their own dialect and vocabulary, which adds a couple of extra keywords on top of the JSON schema keywords, and that's the default dialect for any JSON schema-based schemas in Open API definitions. Those additional keywords are only annotations, so they don't add any extra validation, but people have written their own extensions, and there are various implementations which offer their own extensions. Some of them were before the notion of vocabulary, some of them were after. But I think this is the direction that code generation needs to go. And there has been some effort to start that discussion. And there is a special interest group within the Open API for code generation. But we haven't been able to find anyone to champion the idea long term. Having watched big standard organizations observe how people with limited time and resources can move forward with projects, particularly when doing that work is not their day job or a massive part of their day job, if they're mostly trying to do other things, and the standards are part of a side project, if you like. I've seen and I agree with their change to need to identify projects or initiatives with a champion, because unless there's somebody to really drive the work forward and do the legwork, unless somebody really wants it to happen, it's not always going to happen. It's got a greater chance of succeeding if somebody is there to champion it, push it forward, chair meetings, talk to the community, and keep engaging on those topics. Because the reality is that the core team doesn't have the time to do that with one, let alone all of the other various use cases which are beyond validation. I mean, we're just about handling the validation use case, and there's still so much work to do there. But we're certainly here to enable those use cases. We've been engaged with the starting of we're calling it the interface description language vocabulary. That work has started. There's been lots of issues and questions raised. And as you sort of dig down into those issues, you realize they're quite complex and they're going to take up a lot of your time, and then people's interest sort of peters out. We've also engaged with database vendors. So we've engaged with Oracle and with MongoDB, and there is work on creating a vocabulary which relates specifically to databases and SQL. It's slow work. It's not something these people are focused on 100% of their time. And even when you are, specification work can be pretty slow because you want to do it in an open and collaborative way. And although that takes more time, I believe it's the only way in which these standards can really evolve in a way that's meaningful and has longevity that you otherwise wouldn't have. I realize that's quite a long answer to the question, but I was kind of we can't hear you, Fran. At least I can't hear you. I don't know if everybody else can hear you. I can't hear you still. Can anybody else hear Fran? I'd hate to think it was just me. Oh no. No, I'm not getting you, Fran, at all. Maybe muted, Fran, and you haven't unmuted. I don't know, as I'm not hearing anything from you. I can see you. I can see you fine. But I can't see you. Yeah. Don't know what's going on there. Hopefully, Fran. Oh, hello. Swap sides.
Hey,
I think I can hear you
can you
now.
hear me
I heard
now?
some clicking. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're back with us. So.
Okay. I hear myself, so yeah. I guess I'm. Can you
Yeah,
hear me now?
you're back. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Am I back now?
Oh, yeah,
No?
you're back. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay. Oof. Sorry, man. Sorry. I was doing a huge effort to hear you, to listen to you while trying to fix the problem. So uh, you'll have to forgive me. Can you summarize what you just said? Because I was like, you can't imagine disconnecting and connecting
No, I can
everything.
appreciate that. Um, dialects and vocabularies are a new concept in JSON schema that enable other organizations to create their own extensions to JSON schema.
Mhm.
And there's work on building a vocabulary for data definitions, or we've decided this will be called interface definition language. But it really needs someone to champion that work. And at the moment, we haven't been able to find a champion long term to move that project forward.
Okay,
It's there
I see.
if anybody has the passion and the time to champion it and try and push it forward. We're more than happy for someone to come in and do that, but we just don't have the capacity to do that ourselves,
Yeah.
as we're trying to do everything else related to JSON schema, core and validation, and all the bits that come with that.
So now that you said that, like, I think there's this ideal vocabulary. I think if I'm not mistaken, that's the name, right? Vocab IDL. I
Yeah,
think it's the name of of the repo. Um, so that is I think that will be like a cool way moving forward. But I was reading I was reading through the issues there, which by the way Jonas, who works with us on async API, took the lead there and started creating the issues and starting the discussion, which I appreciate. um, what I was finding is that it was kinda not possible, or not, yeah, not really possible to have that, like, so the way vocabularies work in JSON schema, and correct me if I'm mistaken, um, is that, so we can add that on that vocabulary. We can add stuff, but we cannot remove some stuff from JSON schema. Is that correct? Like, I don't know, some validation stuff. Um,
I mean, you can. We very, very strongly advise against it because you break the interoperability of JSON schema if you do that.
mhm.
And that's one
Yeah.
of the discussions that we've sort of had to have a lot with with Oracle as they develop the databases vocabulary.
Mhm.
If people come in with their existing schemas and want to plug them into another tool, if they then find out, oh, you can't use that schema because it uses these keywords, then they're gonna go, oh, well, I'm not doing that then.
Yeah.
They might not even have any control over the schemas.
Yeah.
It might be schemas from other places. So it seems like a good idea for new projects, but there are so many existing schemas out there that
Yeah.
it's just an interoperability nightmare to do it, and it defeats the
Yeah.
whole
No, I
purpose
know
of
what you mean.
dialects and
Yeah.
vocabularies.
No, that will definitely be a problem. But yeah, sorry, I expressed myself incorrectly here. So what I mean is that you can pass these properties, JSON schema properties, but they will always validate as true. Let's say, like, they're always valid.
Hmm.
Like, you effectively ignore them. You know what I mean? So it's like, for instance, for code generation, we have not, we have additional properties, we have other stuff, right? All off and one off and so on. Could it be that we define a new vocabulary that effectively, like, when it finds a not, it just simply ignores it, and additional properties, it's ignored, and so on, it's ignored. So you can pass a full JSON schema document, but for code generation specifically, this keys will be completely ignored.
Yeah,
Like, you know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
you can totally add your own semantics to specific keywords, and
Hmm.
if for the context of code generation you want to say we don't use the not keyword, and you can even create tooling which links the schemas that are using this vocabulary to go, actually we really don't think you should be using schemas with the not keyword in there, or at least
Hmm.
if you do, you should be aware of the considerations and concerns around that. um, Quite often the not keyword is used to work around older drafts where you don't have the if then else constructs to use the implication method, but not all the time, and it's not necessary in many situations.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's definitely possible, you think?
yeah, it's totally possible to do that. Obviously, it limits the uses, and you might have a more simplified dialect that you use as your base for defining the
Yeah.
code generation vocabulary. But it can still be used with validation as well. I mean, it depends, if the context is multi-use case or single use case. Obviously, it has more utility if it's multi-use case, but a lot of instances and situations, people generally just need the basics.
All right. So let's put a little bit of context here. So what's happening? Let me just like explain why am I asking all these questions. So so I'm currently investigating for version 3 of the spec if we should be separating data definition from data validation, right? So so it's clear that in some cases you will only want the data definition, like for instance generating a type, generating code, as in code, I mean as in generating classes, types, and so on, interfaces. Um, so for instance, in this case, format email, I don't care, right? It's like I don't care if it's an email as long as it's a string. That's all I need to know, right? In this case, right? But I still want to have format email because in other cases, um, it will be useful. For instance, in documentation, I will love to know that it's an email, and so I can clearly display in the documentation that it's an
Mm-hmm.
email, right? And even I can maybe that's not the best example because validating emails is, if not impossible, it's super complex.
Tricky.
But let's say, for instance, with numbers, so age, and it has to be above 18, right? So if age has to be above 18, I may want to also generate code in certain contexts where it really validates. It does the validation, right, of the data. But that's like another type of code generation, if you want, right? So it's like type generation or interface generation and other code generation, right? So my cat is still hanging around, and I'm afraid that she breaks something else. Uh, so that's I was investigating on that, like how we could do it. So we separate the definition um, from validation, and so I thought like, oh, so why not where we let people specify their payloads, for instance, the message payload or the message headers. Uh, we only let or we right now they can just plug the JSON schema there directly. So I was thinking, oh, we probably can split this in two and say like definition, and here's your JSON schema, and validation, and here's your other JSON schema. Um, but then I thought like definition with JSON schema, why? Like maybe we should be using JSON schema in the definition field. Maybe we should be using, in this case, I was thinking on Avro, JTD, like JSON type def, and I was actually like investigating a little bit more JSON type def for that, like to actually like propose it as the default for data definition, but to leave JSON schema for data validation, right, of the data structures. So yeah, so I was at that point. Um, I was at that point, but then I realized like, yeah, that sounds cool in theory when you start a fresh project, a greenfield project, right, and you have nothing defined yet. But when you have an existing project with lots of JSON schema documents, you don't want to be converting those to JTD or Avro or whatever else, right? So you want to use your JSON schema as a data definition language. You know what I mean? So it's like as people are expecting that this will work there, right? Um, or not there, but in this context, right? So yeah, I was wondering like, what options do we have here? Because I will hate to have to propose that we change the default to JTD or Avro just because JSON schema um, doesn't have a vocabulary for that, or it's impossible to have a vocabulary for that. But at the same time, I understand that you might want to remove complexity from JSON schema and and not go in this direction, right? So, so it's I don't know, like just yeah, just thinking out loud, like that. These are like this is the place where I'm on right now. Like we need to provide these two capabilities, and can think on a better alternative.
Yeah, I mean it's a real problem, right? And this is why we came up with this notion of vocabularies to enable the people that do have time, where it's really really important for them to work it out, to go away and write those. I mean, there's nothing stopping you creating your own dialect which you define, which might be similar to a decent type definition, that is more limited or is more expansive than JSON schema. We've talked about could you constrain the keywords that are allowed to be used, and yeah, you could totally do that. That is an option that you could explore, but then you're going to be limiting the interoperability of those schemas.
Yeah.
So there are always going to be trade-offs in terms of what solution you go with.
Yeah.
The other one is adding some keywords by adding your own vocabulary, which enables you to augment simple schemas or more complex schemas with the information that's required to generate those classes. If you look at something like I can't remember which library it is. There is a library to do with form generation that has its own extension to do with the UI and form generation, where you can define all the things like the field names and where certain things go and the styling. It might even be called like UI schema. And it's its own object that sits alongside in a JSON schema object and defines loads of additional and extra things, which give it all the semantics it requires to fill in the gaps that it can't with JSON schema and trying to overload the semantics of keywords in JSON schema. So that's another avenue you could explore.
So that
But it limits the interoperability to in terms of using the JSON schema for code generation elsewhere, because you've built it specifically with your use case in mind. Building generic solutions is really hard, and that's I think why people haven't done it yet. Not only because it's hard in the first place, but for it to be worthwhile, it needs to have buy-ins from multiple vendors, which is why with the database vocabulary, having multiple database vendors on board is really important. As I say, it's really slow moving, and it's probably going to take us a couple of years to get there. But hopefully that journey will be worthwhile in the end when it's implemented in multiple vendors and people can use schemas across databases without interoperability concerns.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I was thinking that. Yeah, I was trying to think now if there's something that we could or that we will want to add. Like we probably would don't want to add anything new to the spec. We just want to change. We just want to ignore stuff, right? So it's like I said, like not additional properties, all off, one off, and probably some other stuff like format email, for instance. Format daytime though might be uh, not ignored. So you want to know if the string is a date, and therefore you might want to generate a date type instead of a string. I mean, just we'll have to explore, but there will. I think if we could just come up with a solution where we can ignore certain stuff. So if you provide this a full JSON schema document to a tool that is accepting only the IDL vocabulary, um, then I mean the IDL, the code generation or type generation or interface generation, whatever. Um, vocabulary, then you should be able to do it. But like nothing should be failing because it has a not or it has a additional properties or whatever, right? Just it will just look into properties, probably type properties and so on, just the basic stuff, and that's it, right? Like I think it will be, I don't know, could be a cool solution.
Yeah, I mean it's a viable option, but obviously there's weighing that against people not being able to use their existing schemas. Most schemas will use additional properties because they want to
Mhm.
constrain to only be using the properties that are defined. But ignoring it kind of makes sense. There's also the consideration of the composability. People are using unevaluated properties to enable schemas to be composed. But as you say, it might be completely irrelevant for async API and code generation. It might not matter. Either way, if you don't use their validation vocabulary and you just use the core and the applicator vocabulary, you're still going to have to handle references. But
Mhm.
then you can, if people are building schemas or modifying their existing schemas for a particular use case, they might be more willing to do a bit of that work to mold them or change them or modify them as part of a standardized process to get that code generation. Or they might not. I don't know. It's just something you'll have to investigate,
Yeah.
right? You'll have to
Yeah.
um, decide how much time you want to invest in working on a solution and decide how you're going to evaluate the success of that solution. And it's very, very tricky.
I agree. It's you can't imagine how much I've been fighting against this myself,
Yeah, I
trying to
mean,
think of
I
a good
wish there was
solution.
a yeah, I wish there was some sort of like easy, quick fix
Yeah.
solution for this, but we've
Well,
been
actually,
looking for it for
actually,
5 years, right? So
no, actually, it is now that you told me. Like we can override with the vocabularies. We can override semantics as well. We can just ignore this stuff. Now it's easy. We can just create an async API vocabulary if we want, and that's it. That's all we will have to do. Thing is that, of course, we will want this to become like the way people generate code with JSON schema, right? Not just the way people generate code with with async API. I was just getting a call in right now on Slack. This is crazy. Everything is happening today.
I mean,
Um,
there's an alternative approach where you don't need to define that you can't use specific keywords, and it's using annotation results from the validation process, or even using the annotations from um, you know from a schema as part of what you use to generate your classes. Um, that way, you remove all of the issues around how does application work, or how do I know how to handle this situation or references, because you don't have to do any of that. You just use JSON schema to give you the validation result and the annotations from that, and then you could generate classes using those annotation results. You would have to define specific annotations, additional keywords that are annotations to give you the semantics that you need. But it would certainly be like a sidestepping all of the problems you're facing. Um, but as working out the specifics of how that would work, I guess is a challenge. But it is another avenue to explore that wouldn't exclude your users from being able to use the schemas they have right now.
how often does this conversation come up in the JSON schema community, like generating code?
um, but well, I kind of don't count anymore because people come in and there are a number of solutions which work well, or at least good enough for generating types in TypeScript, and that seems to be the number one thing people want. And that seems to work. I don't hear many complaints or problems around using that. And compared to code generations in other languages, I have seen many more questions and complaints saying it doesn't work properly. I think that's because the TypeScript usage is newer, so the libraries are newer and probably better supported. So they've been, handling all the cases like references and additional properties and all that sort of thing. And it may be because people are building schemas new for this particular context.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was your original question? I've lost my flow there.
Like, how often do you get this?
Yeah.
Does this topic?
I think we've kind of stopped counting because it comes up as a lot, or often, I should say, regularly. And we say, yes, that would be lovely. We'd love to have a code generation vocabulary. Here's the repository. Would you like to contribute? And then you kind of don't hear anything. Occasionally, one or two people do go and leave some comments or have a look at the issues, but it comes back to this champion. Somebody needs to champion the work to drive it forward, have a criteria, have a direction, have an agenda, and drive that work. It needs multiple people to be involved to make that happen. People want it, but they don't want or there's nobody putting a strong enough business case for people to put money down to make it happen. Who needs this as a big organization, and who needs it enough that they can budget some people to work on it? That's, I think, the question you should be asking.
We're gonna put some money there.
Yeah.
We do, I can tell you. Like so yeah, like this is a dichotomy that we have to solve at some point. Like people or people either thinking it's for definition plus validation, or thinking it's only for validation, or thinking it's only for definition. Actually, it's not the dichotomy anymore. So the thing is that we have to remove this confusion as soon as possible from async API, I think. And I think it will also be beneficial for OpenAPI to remove this confusion as soon as possible. So people stop using JSON schema to generate code and then start complaining because JSON schema doesn't do whatever they thought it will do, right? And yeah, you're lucky because they're not going to JSON schema to complain, to the JSON schema Slack to complain.
I mean,
they're coming.
My kind of hope on this, that the vendors would be, looking at OpenAPI 3.1 and going, oh, that's new JSON schema. Let's read about that. Oh, it has all these new things, and we need to do code generation. Let's write some tooling that will do that, and then share it openly. I haven't seen anybody claim to do code generation from OpenAPI 3.1. And those that I have seen it do code generation previously tend to not work very well or not be maintained for like 4 years. So
OpenAPI generator is not working with the
I haven't
one?
seen any code generators for OpenAPI 3.1. I would love to see some, but I haven't seen any.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's that?
Sorry?
Curious. I'm curious. Why do you think it's that?
I don't know. I assumed that vendors that support OpenAPI 3.1 would that have code generation for 3.0 would have code generation for 3.1, but maybe because it's seen as a non-major version, they haven't necessarily realized that they're going to need to put some serious investment in. My preference for OpenAPI would have been to jump a major version to signal, hey, there's a major change here in the underlying specification that you're actually using. But it was decided otherwise, and that's fine. We'll okay, try to get some communications out there, and we're slowly getting there. But I don't think many people realize how big a jump OpenAPI has made from 3.0 to 3.1. So in terms of your payload definition, it's absolutely huge. And that, I think, part of the challenge is because there's nothing in the specification that defines how you use it for code generation, for example. It's just a definition, and you can interpret that definition any way you like. Compared to JSON schema, which is used for validation, we have a test suite, so we can say with a good level of certainty if you write an implementation whether you're compliant or not. And I think for code generation, that's something we also need. So maybe even starting with a test suite. What things do you want to happen in different situations is a good way to go. But the IDL vocabulary repository within JSON Schema, I don't think we even got to that point. There was still some sort of fundamental, foundational discussions and talks around exactly how such a thing might work. So there are a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And I think a true solution for this is going to take a couple of years, realistically. But it still needs someone to champion it. And that's the big challenge at the moment. I think that's my perspective on how this is going to work.
I think I'm gonna give it a try myself. Just to champion. I mean, not to champion the whole, coming up with the final version, the final first version, but to push it forward a little bit.
Yeah, championing doesn't mean you do all the work. It means you go and encourage other people to do the work. And I think you have some experience doing that, right? So
I was about to say, like, I'm the master doing that. You do this, you do that. No, I'm kidding. Actually, exactly. I'm super bad at this. I always try to make everything myself, and that's actually a problem too. So yeah. Well, I mean, so we're about to make an hour already. So, is there anything you want to mention from JSON Schema now that you have people watching and people watching?
Yeah, people are still here. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the big thing with JSON Schema at the moment is we're trying to hire some people. We're trying to hire a developer, and we're trying to hire a technical community manager. And I know you guys are trying to hire people as well, but JSON Schema, we currently have me full time, and that's it. And as I say, wear of many hats. You don't wear any of them for long enough to make big dents in the bigger projects that require doing, like tooling. So both the positions are still open. I'd say the technical community manager is more challenging to fill. So if you are a technical community manager and you're looking for work, please do let me know via Twitter or any other way that you know how to reach me, or our Slack, or even come in the chat and say hello. We may be shortly filling the developer position, but that's still unsure. So please, do apply. The applications are on the Postman website, postman.com/careers. So if you want to work in open source full time, but also have the assurance of working for a company with a reputation like Postman, then apply there as well. But yeah, please do reach out to me personally. In addition to applying, that's going to be a huge benefit.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Like, is it for Postman to work full time on JSON Schema, or is it to work on JSON Schema organization? Because we actually thinking on hiring people to work on async API organization, not for Postman, not for any company, but for async API organization directly.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean it's we don't have enough funds as JSON Schema to employ anyone. That would be quite tricky. But it is full time for JSON Schema, the organization, paid by Postman. So employed by Postman, working for JSON Schema.
Okay, sounds good. Cool, Ben. So thanks a lot for joining, and sorry that I'm looking to the side, but you're now there. I know the camera is here, but it's weird.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me, and I hope this has been a really useful discussion.
No, thanks for joining, because it's really like, I think it's a hot topic. JSON Schema, it's been going through a series of great things in the last years, and partly thanks to you as well. So I thought that we should be speaking about it, and also all these concerns about code generation that are relevant for the async API community, and in the end, this is for the async API community, right? So I thought that it would be cool that we discuss these things, and we think out loud about this. And I think this is kind of cool. Like, we think here. We don't. You don't have to come up with an answer. Like, it's okay if you don't have an answer, or like we did today, right? Like we learn things. I learned things from you, so that's really cool,
Mm.
and that's a conversation started, right? So
Yeah,
that's really
definitely.
cool.
I would say it's not just me, and you'll know this as well, that it's the community stepping up and
Yeah,
taking ownership over things, and just
yeah,
like the test suite, I've hardly had to be involved in that at all. I just leave that in the capable hands of the people that are making it happen. And if I'm asked to give opinions, I might, but yeah, I rarely touch the test suite or the website, to be honest. So there are the community the last couple of years has really upped their game, and I hope that continues.
nice. That's cool. So thanks again for
Thank
joining, and
you.
thanks everyone for watching and commenting. And yeah, see you next week with another episode. I'll be announcing who's coming next week once it's confirmed. You know how it goes. So yeah. Um, thanks, Ben. Thanks everyone,
Thank you so much,
and
man. Thank
see
you.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.